Hey guys, welcome to Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy. I'm Ken Tamplin, of course, and we're getting started a little early just so that we can get some people on board and do some shout outs. So, guys, I want to say thank you to my notification squad again. You guys seriously rock, and it's always good to have you guys nice, bright, and early. That's great. And I want to just do a few shout outs to some other people that are coming in. So, we've got. Let's see here. Tracy, by the way, Tracy, I wanted to tell you who Tracy is. Tracy actually does a couple of my Facebook fan pages, and she's from the UK. Just a total love, and has just done an awesome job for me, so I really appreciate that. Furry Murray is on. Rock and Roll Furry. Good to see you, man. SMR. Intent does drinking orange juice. Well, tell you what, let me get to those questions. Yeah, it can. Not only can it, is it acidic, but it has a lot of sugar in it. We've talked about that. So we're going to do a whole thing on more diet stuff. Yo from Swaziland. Bob Wilson from New York. We've got, let's see, Gaston, Jure Gaston. Now, for you guys out there, Gaston, is one of the guys that has sung on my channel a few times. So I recommend you guys check out Gaston's stuff. Gaston, you can kind of go ahead and post your name on there. That's great, so people can check you out. We've got Wasi from Bangladesh, Lady and Jack from Brazil, Jeremy from Missouri. We have got, let's see here, Scott from The Difference is Hormones. LOL, my bad. Hey, we're going to talk about that today, so I'm glad you brought that up. Dave from England. We've got Canada. We've got all kinds of places, guys. So anyway, we have a lot to cover today. So I know that we're still waiting for people to get on board, so they're going to have to kind of watch the preview of this back, and I will get to your questions at the end. I have 40 pages of stuff that I created today. So I don't think I'm going to get through 40 pages. But let me tell you kind of one of the big reasons I'm doing these live streams is that first off, I want you to get to know me and be able to ask questions in real time. The second thing is though I see a lot of people just giving out tips and information, but what good does that information do if you can't use it for anything? Okay, I have this knowledge, how great is that? But if I have no practical application, what good does it do me? So the goal of these things are to give you practical things that you can do, not just to get head knowledge and heart knowledge, but to actually put this in practice, okay, in application. So today's subject is guys versus girls' voices. What's the difference? But I could just sit here and say, oh, well, a guy's voice is this and a girl's voice is that, and leave it at that. And you go, oh, great, hey, I have this information. But I'm also going to cover as much as I can different vocal types. And that way you can determine what your vocal fach or type is. That's F-A-C-H. It sounds like a swear word, but it's not. It's German. It means category or type, or what actually compartmentalized. To compartmentalize a voice is the literal exegetical transliteration is what that would be. Anyway, but so as we get into this, I'm gonna cover some things about the voice, how sound is created, the difference between younger voices and older voices, and so forth. And then I'm gonna actually break this down into categories. Now we're gonna get to that. I may not get to all of it, and I recorded some really cool old pieces of some opera. And for those of you that don't love opera, please stay in this with me because it will really open your mind up to how this is applied to modern music or contemporary music. So I want to say this. So I want to talk about the voice. We're going to get started here. Now, vocal frequencies are measured in hertz, Hz in hertz, so cycles. Now, what does that mean? Well, let me give you an example. So if you have 100 hertz, and you guys have all seen a heart monitor or a wave monitor, it kind of goes like this, right? 100 hertz or 100 cycles is how many times that thing vibrates in a second, okay? So 100 hertz, which is pretty slow, actually, 100 cycles per second is like, okay? And by the way, I'm gonna get my guitar out in a minute and I'm gonna go through, let me give you kind of something interesting. So when you guys, you musicians out there, you have your tuners, right? And you have somebody who says, oh, tune to A440, that's 440 cycles. Right? So that means that string or that note is vibrating 440 times a second. So this is how this works, all right? Now, I'm bringing this up not to get, hyper technical on you and make this, real clinical, but I really want you to understand how this works so that you can see yourself and where your voice resonates at, and it will really help you. So 100 cycles is 100 times a second. That's a pretty low vibration. Now, babies cry at about 500 cycles. So about 60 cycles above that A440 that I showed you, that's about the cry of a baby, okay? Kids speak, and I mean kids plural, not just guys or girls, because they have about the same range when they're younger. So kids speak somewhere between 250 cycles and 400 cycles. So just below a baby's cry, and lower down to 250 cycles. Grown men like myself, and about what I'm speaking to you in right now, is about 125 cycles. Women speak at around 200, okay? Almost double that of men. Now this changes, and I'm gonna get into some things about this. Now, during puberty, and let's talk about this, because a lot of people, why did Michael Jackson lose his voice when he was younger? He had this real high range, and later in life he didn't have it, and we can talk about all kinds of different people like that. But during puberty, both boys and girls' voices drop. However, boys, they have testicles, of course, as we know. They should, at least. And it produces testosterone, okay? And it's a hormone. And that's what this guy just left this question here. Says, hey, what about hormones? Well, the testosterone causes the boys' vocal folds to grow longer and thicker than girls, okay? It's just a known fact. Now, it's also one of the reasons that you hear a lot about the hormone therapies going on in transgenders, because they're trying to actually physiologically change the physical structure of boys to girls and girls to boys. And I'm not going to get into that, but just know that that's sort of how that works, okay? And a reason, too, by the way, for the castrati. Now, I want to talk about kind of a funny, back in what was it, like the mid-1600s, all the way up to like the early 1900s, so like 1923. I mean, it's kind of scary stuff. There was something called the castrati. It started out in Spain, and then it kind of migrated to Germany, and it kind of went around Europe. And that was taking prepubescent boys, and at the age of puberty, make them eunuchs, cut off their testicles. And what that would do, for the most part, it wasn't foolproof, but what it would do is it would keep them with the high range of their childhood. Without the boys, when they get older, they usually drop an octave. It would keep that octave, and yet the voice would still maturate to some degree, because I'm going to go into this more. The testosterone is cut off, okay? Now, testosterone also grows the whole facial structure and whatnot, so cavities get larger and bigger because of testosterone, particularly for males. So the castrati, some people, and guys, I don't think this is true, but people are saying, oh, is Dimash one of the castrati? Did they, because he could sing so high, he never really lost his range. I don't think so, guys. He has the range of that, so that is a little scary, but I don't think he's castrati, but we'll talk more about this in a minute. Anyway, so during puberty, girls' voices drop only about 3 tones, 4 tones max usually, whereas a boy's voice will drop an entire octave. Okay, so with the girls, you don't really notice that much change. They get a little frustrated because I might lose a few notes at the high end, 3-4 notes up top. For the most part, it doesn't change that much. Guys' voices go, right? That's a big drop, right? When you hear it. So, and because they're longer and thicker, chords that is, it shows that that the voice that sells becomes fatter and rounder and more robust. So let me give you kind of an example of this. I want to demonstrate a little something on the guitar, because it has to do with string frequency. So if I have my guitar here and I've got that's that note, that's an E, and I go right? The more, if you look down here, this is the end of my fretboard right here, okay? This little wing nut here, right? Now that, between that nut, which ends the resonating of the string, to here, if it's open from the bridge all the way to here, is the length of the resonation of that string, okay? The minute I put my finger on it here, what does it do? It cuts off this whole part, and I only get the size of the string from here to here. So I've shortened the string. So, as it stands to reason, the shorter the string, or the shorter the vocal folds, the higher the cycles, or the higher the note. Okay, so I want to make this clear so we understand it. And again, I'm trying not to get too technical about it, but at least it should make some sense to you. So as boys drop about an octave, and I just showed you with the string kind of what that looks like, their vocal folds grow. By the way, they grow at around 17 centimeters. I'm going to get 17 to 24, and I'm going to get to that in a minute about the size. But that's about, they start out about this size, and then they grow out to about that size. It's a lot. Girls start out about that size, and they only grow about that much. Okay? That's not very much. And I'm going to get to exact centimeters in a minute. But now, the other interesting thing about this is that, believe it or not, string resonation, particularly in the vocal folds, is directly related also to oxygen. Now, here's what I mean, because we're going to talk about how this works and how we get air from the lung, goes through the trachea, it hits the voice box. That creates, hits with the vocal folds themselves. They resonate. That creates sound. Sound projects out of the mouth and the face. That's how we project singing, right? Through the vocal tract, it's called. Well, as it turns out, believe it or not, a funny side note to this is that the oxygen itself also plays a role. Let me explain. It's a funny little side note just for you guys out there. Helium. You take a hit of helium. Well, because helium is less dense than oxygen, right? Because helium rises, get a balloon, helium rises. It's why we can talk like Mickey Mouse if we take a hit of helium, right? And then the helium goes away, and then we resume back to our normal speaking. Well, believe it or not, this is also true for other gases like xenon or sulfur hexafluoride, for example, which is like greenhouse gases. Those do exactly the opposite. Because they're more dense than air, it actually makes your voice drop really low. Just in the same way helium made your voice go high, sulfur hexafluoride actually makes your voice drop. So it's kind of interesting that there are elements that play a role. It's not just the string itself. It's also the cavities. It's also the size of the larynx, the size of the vocal folds themselves. So, and by the way, you growlers out there, please don't start huffing, a bunch of sulfur hexafluoride and xenon. It's not good for you. I'm just mentioning by way of, humor and interest. But I want to get back to the subject here. So now, men and women as we get older, and they claim this is sort of a animal kingdom kind of thing. Men's voices drop even lower than the resonation of the size of their folds because they are looking to intimidate other males. So what we do is we walk in the room with some bravado and we say, "Hey baby, you want to go outside?" Right? Because we, in the animal kingdom and apparently in the human kingdom, psychologically we feel if we speak lower, it commands more authority. And we know this to be true. Look around in culture, that happens. And in fact, that's even happening in the female part of our culture as well, where women no longer want to speak in higher Mickey Mouse voices. They want to drop their voices down too to be taken seriously in culture as well. So it's a psychological thing in this as well. So psychology plays a role in this because if we think of ourselves singing and speaking low, we sing and speak low. But also it's true if we can think of ourselves in speaking high and training ourselves in that way, creating what I call little boy voice, it works both ways. So there's all these components in how this works. But I thought you guys might find this fascinating as you're trying to, work and play with your own voice, so to speak. But anyway, I want to go to a couple of things about the actual size of the folds themselves. So the vocal folds, full grown for men, are about 17 millimeters to 25 millimeters. So about 3/4 of an inch is the best way to look at that. Female vocal folds are between 10 and 16 millimeters. Okay, so guys have about 60% length on women, so to speak, though the actual drop is usually about an octave, sometimes more, sometimes less, and we're going to get into different vocal types on that in a minute. But anyway, so the other interesting thing about this is that when the vocal folds themselves, and no one really knows the answer to this, but I want to give you my take on it. The larynx that are in the vocal folds that are inside your larynx. So for guys, it's your Adam's apple. This is your voice box. Okay. The primary function of the larynx is actually to decide whether liquid or food is going to go down the esophagus, which is into the tube into the stomach, or mitigate air to go into the trachea. So in other words, it's switching back and forth to determine where it's going to allow food or air to go, food and water or air. So it's doing this kind of juggling act or refereeing, so to speak, those two. The voice box or speaking is a secondary function of that mechanism. So some people say, and I believe it's true, when you have acid reflux and acid comes up through the esophagus and into the folds themselves, the folds weren't designed, or the cords weren't designed to handle that kind of abuse. So they get really irritated and the acid washes away the mucosa in the folds themselves, dries them out, they become leathery, and then you could get polyps or nodes or walk around, with this constant sounding like you have a tired, fatigued voice, kind of thing, right? So just as a side note of that, understand that singing or speaking supposedly is a secondary mechanism to that. But anyway, so as sound is made by the mouth, as air is pushed out of the lung through the voice box is a structure at the top of the windpipe that is made of cartilage. Okay, cartilage and sinews made of collagen. I'll get into that in a second. So stretched across these two pieces of cartilage. So there's the cricoarytenoid cartilage at the top, and there's a thyroid cartilage at the bottom. And across these two, there's these kind of rubber bandy-like things that are based collagen that look like they're in a V shape, and they're stretched like this, and it stretches them back and forth like this in order to create phonation or sound. Okay, that's how it works. So the smaller the folds, or the higher, I should say, the smaller folds this way. So if they're way up here like this, right? That means the higher the frequency, or the higher the range. So girls being smaller will be higher in range. Guys being longer and thicker will be bigger and more robust. Okay, and guys usually speak considerably louder than women too. That's another component to this that if I have time, I'll try to get into. But anyway, so we have these kind of elastic bands, so to speak. Now, as the air is expelled from the lungs and it comes up and it passes between the vocal folds themselves, the cords, it makes them vibrate. Okay. Now, we talked about what my speaking vibration is, but if I go, right? I just went through a lot of cycles. I probably went through from 50 cycles all the way up to, 6,000 cycles and back down again, or 5,000 cycles and back down. So the range, so whatever spectrum we are in a range is an actual number. It's not like a letter like, oh, he hit a C, or oh, he hit a G. No, he hit A440, or he hit, C whatever, right? So each one of these are actually can be looked at from a numerical value and not just the note values as we refer to it in nomenclature in music. So I thought that's an important thing. So several changes occur between teenage boys that causes their voice to deepen. So we talked about the cartilage in the voice is very sensitive to testosterone. So as the cartilage receives the testosterone sent from the testicles, and if the castrati doesn't have it, it doesn't get sent, they stay little boys, so to speak, right? But anyway, it grows larger and thicker, okay? At the same time, the vocal cords themselves grow 60% larger and longer and become thicker, I should say. And then when they vibrate, they do so at a lower frequency. So the longer they get, the fatter they get, the less vibration. The slower the vibration, the lower the frequency, okay? So a boy's vocal folds might go from 200 times a second, like the girls when they were younger, all the way down to 100 or 125, 130, kind of where I'm speaking to you at right now. Now, while this change takes place, the voice box tilts at an angle. It tilts forward, actually, in the neck. And you can actually start to see the Adam's apple protrude. That's why as they go through puberty and we see the voice box itself, the voice box is actually in there. It's growing, and as it grows, it protrudes forward or tilts forward, and that's why we see an Adam's apple, okay, for guys. Another change also occurs in boys' faces through puberty because like the cavities and whatnot, those get shrunken if there's no testosterone. If it's fed testosterone, it gets bigger, okay? And it creates bigger spaces in the sinuses, in the throat itself, and so forth. So anyway, and that deepens the sound of the voice even bigger. So a bigger space, right, a rounder space, the bigger the sound. Have you guys ever taken a Coke bottle when you were a kid and you blow it, doo, doo, right? Because it's got a big cavity. You fill it with water and it goes, doo, doo, right? Because the space is not as large. The resonation goes up, the hertz frequency goes up, and also the size, the roundness, the fatness of the sound also rises as well. So as we've seen, these changes are both male and female. Females not so much, and I'm going to talk more about that for you girls because there's some important aspects of this I want to cover. They usually reach maturity with several key factors, okay? They initially start out at about the same size of vibration, both guys and girls, and I talked about the cricoarytenoid and the thyroid cartilage. And then, something that happens that is kind of unfortunate. we go through puberty and then we kind of feel like that's it. You know, we can't change anything, right? So guys, their voice drops. That's what I get. I'm an octave down. Girls, their voice drops a couple, 3 notes. They figure I lost some range, but I'm good. And they feel like this has been codified or marbleized, like it's not changeable. And that's just not true. And I want to tell you kind of my story. And by the way, this isn't just, ivory tower, armchair talk telling you about something I haven't personally experienced. This is personal experience that I'm telling you that hopefully you'll relate to, okay? So we talked about the German vocal fachs system, and I want to go through what that is and why it's important. Before I get there, though, I'm going to discuss how the vocal fachs system came to be and why it's a big deal. Okay. Now, in Germany, there was Wagner and Verdi and these different composers were having a tough time auditioning singers to cast them for roles to play in these various musicals and arias that they were writing, okay? And so they wanted to come up with a system, if there's a dramatic or if there's a buffo or buffo, however you want to say it, different vocal types of vocal fachs, they wanted to go, okay, he's a villain or she's a villain. Or she's the sweet little girl that sings the Hansel and Gretel song. Or she's the money note, the big high money note at the night, blah, blah, blah. So they categorized 25 different vocal fachs, okay? And it was pretty ingenious on the one hand for casting, but it was actually disastrous on the other hand for, like I said, codifying or placing people in what I call the caste system. We've talked about this before, like the Indian caste system. Once a pauper, you're born a pauper, you're always a pauper, no matter how many lives you come back to in reincarnation, you never get past this social status, so to speak. Well, this is true in the vocal fachs system, and it's a lot like what happens in movies today. So you get a guy that's a villain, and it's really hard to see that actor cast outside of being a villain, right? Think about it. Now, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. Let's take Bradley Cooper, for example. One minute he's cast as American Sniper, and then the next minute he's cast as a rock star in whatever that movie was. But anyway, what was it called? Oh my gosh, I'm just had a brain fart. I'll think of it in a second. You guys know it with Lady Gaga. Anyway, so and what's interesting about that is he's still Bradley Cooper, right? He's still Bradley Cooper. His personality didn't change that much. But the roles were so dramatically different, you could see him playing different roles. And he's a really well-known actor and has done a lot of stuff. A Star is Born is what I meant to say. Sorry, I had a brain fart. Anyway, so with that said, that should be true of the voice. And to some extent it is. There are different voice types or vocal fachs that overlap. Well, if that's the case, and it is, then it isn't just 25 different vocal fachs. Every category should be recategorized for someone that can play 3 different roles. Well, that guy isn't just a spinto or a coloratura or this or that. They are 3 different things, and we're going to give it its own category. Now, this is getting crazy off the charts. Ken, slow down. Dude, what are you talking about? I'm doing this because I want to break down some of these types for you guys, and I won't be able to cover them all. It would take an hour alone just to play a few pieces of that. But at least it'll give you a fairly decent handle on how this works, okay? When we think of male and female voices, usually we just think of things very simply. For the male, we think of a bass, all right? We think of a tenor, bass and tenor, right? And then sometimes we'll think of countertenor, and sometimes tenors will sing in the alto range and so forth like that. I'm not saying that there aren't, different categories for bass and tenors and stuff. We're going to cover that in a second. For the women, it's similar. It's soprano. Sometimes if you really get crazy, second soprano, right? Soprano, alto, contralto, right? And you just sort of think of things as, oh, she's either a soprano or she's an alto. So as we go through choir and stuff as kids, we get these really, really basic terms. Well, it turns out there's a lot more to it than that. And I just want to discuss these, and then I want to play a couple of these things so that you can see how this works out. Now, I personally have studied Appoggio, which is bel canto opera, all my life, so I'm pretty familiar with this stuff. And I want to say that what I'm about to tell you has changed considerably over the years. So I'm going to give you traditional definitions, but I'm going to give you one quick example of how a definition has morphed over the years, okay? You guys out there that maybe in the know in the opera world might have heard the term lyric tenor, okay? Lyric tenor. Now, lyric tenor predominantly was more kind of given to the older guy with a smooth voice, very legato, very smooth, nothing crazy, warm, round, warm tones, but predominantly to an aged or an older voice. Well, over the years, the term lyric tenor has come just to mean smooth and voluminous, meaning the voluminous, being consistent in volume so that there's no extremes in any end of the spectrum. So I've actually even heard Paul McCartney be recategorized as a lyric tenor, though his voice doesn't sound old or aged in that sense. It's taken on a different, definition over the years. And I can't go through all this stuff, guys. It would bore you to tears, but I'm just letting you know it's out there, okay? So anyway, so within the fachs system, as we have 25 different classifications, the word fach just means to compartmentalize. Well, that kind of sucks, because what that means is that I'm gonna deem you or categorize you as X, and you're always just X. And that really sucks, because that was done to me. I was told I was a high baritone, and in the baritone range, right, I was kind of a dramatic bari, so they didn't want me singing much beyond an F sharp 4. And then whether I was doing in Dalla Sua Pace, didn't matter what aria I was taking on. What would happen is that I was chastised for singing, like G4, which is a really low note for me. To give you an example of what this is, F sharp. Hey! Now you that know me, hey! I can go to an octave of that like it's nothing. But in the opera world, and that's when people say, well, what's the difference in how people teach in opera and how people teach in this and that? Like I said, not all vocal coaches are created equal. Not all singing methods are created equal, folks. And be very careful where you get your information from. Make sure the singer, the vocal coach sings and sings well and can prove it, really understands not just his voice, his students, but your voice and how to bring out of you the most out of you that can be brought. So anyway, getting back to this. So this vocal fach, which really means to compartmentalize the sound, also means that it's relegating you to a specific range. Well, that's lame. It's good to get to know your voice. It's good to understand your range and kind of where you fit in the spectrum and scope of the vocal fachs system. But it really sucks if you ever want to sing something that sits outside of what you're categorized at or what you're relegated to. Now, before I get into this, I know, Ken, you keep saying before you get into this, for crying out loud, you're already 27 minutes in, aren't you? Like, yeah, but this is some cool stuff, guys. At least it's fun for me. I'm going to give you an example of who has bucked this system. Maria Callas. She's a very famous opera singer. And Maria was, she's kind of sobre. She did some coloratura stuff. I've heard her do some spinto stuff, not so hot, but she does it. And whatnot. I'll tell you what this means in a minute. But Maria got sick and tired of being cast for specific roles, okay? So it'd be kind of like an actress. I'm just tired of playing the villain. I want to play the good guy for a change, or I want to be the melancholy guy, or I want to be the happy guy. I don't want to be the villain. I want to do something else with my life, right? I can do this. Well, she just decided she was just going to sing pieces that she liked. And if the opera world didn't like it, they could just go to hell. Really, I kid you not. And she took so much flack for that early on. And you know what? She just didn't care. First, she did it. She went in and tried to play the roles and do the thing. And then Maria just sang for Maria. And before you knew it, people were actually writing roles for her voice, because she was such a great singer, incorporating different nuances of things she'd done that she'd proven she could step outside the box. And she just became herself. And this was just anathema in the opera world. Let me tell you guys, you step outside your box and you're ostracized from that community. You're excommunicated. So, but anyway, so she did this with such panache and such flash and such amazingness that she was forgiven. And by the way, this breaks down to not just the roles themselves, but the vocal fachs and the way she would sing them and treat them. And I'm going to touch on this in a minute because it'll be really cool for you to go, hey, man, I could see myself doing that. I'm not just a baritone, or I'm not just an alto. And by the way, one more thing. By the way, I was going through some research on this stuff to confer with some old notes I had from many, many years ago of my studies. And I was laughing at the outrageous stupidity of some of the stuff posted on the internet. I'm going on Wikipedia, and I was looking up contraltos, and I was looking up countertenors, and it was saying countertenors sing from, the C3 all the way up to a D7 and beyond. I'm like, what? Who writes this crap? This is Wikipedia. A D7 and beyond? First of all, the flageolet whistle register is up around past the D6 and beyond. So you start to hear the whistle register, the faux vocal folds, fake vocal folds take on after that. So it's not even a note value, number one, pal, whoever wrote that, in Wikipedia as a countertenor, but in contraltos, countertenor. But D7, guys, if I can't even play it on a guitar or I don't have an instrument that'll accommodate that note. But so be careful where you get your information from. Even Wikipedia is suspect, okay? So anyway, let's go through this. So within the vocal fach system, I want to talk about different categories. Now, we talk about sopranos, we talk about altos, we talk about tenors, we talk about basses, okay? Within each one of those categories, there's gobs of subcategories. Remember, there's 25 of these things. I want to just talk about a few. I'm going to play a couple little pieces here for you to hear it so you can hear the difference. Now, with an untrained ear, you're going to say in opera, it just sounds like opera to me. It all sounds the same. Well, I'm going to try to play it and talk about it in such a way that it will be applicable for you, not just for head knowledge, but for you to understand and see how you could represent this sound yourself as you're going through this. Now, guys, I have a singing course. I wasn't even going to plug the course, but I have to say it because in the course, I discuss all of these kinds of factors for the voice so that you yourself can find your own vocal fach and then use that as a springboard to expound as a platform to sing in other styles, other ranges, other intonations and tonalities and so forth. But I'm starting with the category of soprano. Now, soprano is a category. It's the highest female voice type. And sopranos often take the lead female role, okay? So the vocal range for an operatic soprano is roughly from middle C. This is below C4, so C3, all right? And by the way, a lot of them don't go that low, so this is kind of a, But anyway, so middle C up to 2 octaves above that, which is high C, C6, okay? So C5 is the male tenor. Let's just do this real quick. This is C5. And that's the C6 for the female soprano. That's the high note, okay? Now, that isn't to say that they don't go higher than that, but I just want to point that out that that is the high note. Oh, by the way, that was a C6. Did you hear that? How high that is? Imagine. I don't know if you can this. That would be a C7. Now imagine a D7 beyond that. It's like, and beyond, a D7 beyond. Yeah, a male contralto or alto or alto singing alto or countertenor is going to sing up there. Sing notes. Hold on. I just have to do that. Anyway, all right, so soprano is the highest note in the female range. And from C to C, 2 octaves. Now, though plenty of music, particularly for the coloratura sopranos, I'm going to talk about them because they're bad sisters. They ascend considerably farther than that. They can get up to, some of them can get to a C7, which is really, really high. It's dog whistle high, but it's there, and further. And sopranos are split into 5 categories. So just the sopranos alone are split into 5 categories. The coloratura is the first one I want to start out with. Now, the coloratura soprano is capable of seemingly superhuman feats. I kid you not. Now, some of you have probably seen Disney Diva 7, and she's not even singing that high. And you've seen the Fifth Element song that she does. And I know Dimash has done a version of this as well. And you hear runs of a coloratura. They are very difficult. In fact, they're so difficult, I'm about to play something for you right now of a really well-known coloratura. And I want to also annotate that what the voice is extremely agile, firing out fast-paced coloratura sections that ascend as high as the 3rd F above middle C, and a few even higher. So they'll actually do these in octaves. Now, for you guys out there that want to challenge yourself on some exercises, I challenge you to do some octave exercises. They are the hardest exercises in the world to do, and coloraturists spit them out like they're nothing. It's crazy. I'll give you an example of this in a second. These roles have existed from the Baroque 20th century opera, and it's particularly fine examples is Lucia in Don Zanida's Lucia de Lammermoor, and an excerpt of that is down. So I'm going to do the mad scene, and I want to play the mad scene for you because I just want you to get a flavor of this, guys, because it's just crazy. So please raise your hand and tell me you can hear this. Normally, by the way, I normally have my 4K camera up I just bought. I normally put this stuff in my equipment in the back so everything's crystal clear and the visual's clear. I had to borrow a digital box to get my system to work because with COVID-19, everybody on the planet is trying to stream right now, so those boxes weren't available. So I pre-ordered one. It's supposed to be here this Wednesday. The last 2 sessions I did, I had this working from one that I borrowed to make sure I could get it to work. So I'm sorry today that I don't have it, but I should have it for next Thursday's session. But with that said, hopefully you'll be able to hear this. I'm going to play it now. Check this out. Okay, now you heard some of those crazy runs. Now it's not like Mariah Carey, and she does some coloratura stuff, and she's pretty good at it. Not this good, but she's pretty good at it. Could you guys hear that? Tell me, somebody, gang? Okay, so all right, since you could hear it, I can go through some of these other ones here. So it's interesting. Did you hear how crazy some of those runs were? I actually trained some of this. I've got a young gal right now. She's 14. Her name's Jordana, and I'm actually training her to do some of this stuff. I did a lot of this stuff when that was one of my biggest challenges for me as a high barrier. Going, I am gonna take on the most difficult thing there is just to prove to myself I could do this, and I was able to do this. And so now I'm training other people to do it. One particular girl that's doing a fine job. So now you can see kind of the coloratura, sort of what they're capable of, their strength, the power, the fluidity, the agility, and so forth. Now I want to get to sobre, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want to kind of point some things out. So sobre soprano refers to more of an archetype or character. It's kind of a cheeky, sort of fast-pitched, bright, young. It's sung with kind of some swing usually, but it's usually a young, sweet, bright voice that sings stuff like this. And the tessitura, by the way, I forgot to mention what that is. The tessitura of a voice is what that means is the usable range or the best part of your vocal range. So your tessitura, or what is your usable range, your best part of your range. So the tessitura of these ranges in parts sometimes can be really high, but they don't have anywhere near the excess of a coloratura, and they don't do anywhere near the same runs. So you're going to hear, as I describe this, I want you to listen for this, a really bright, high-pitched, clear, more of a clear, bright, pointed sound, and kind of younger sort of sound. So here we go. Whoops, my bad, wrong one. Here we go. I put a bunch of these. Right? It's this real bright, snappy, happy, clappy, poppy sort of sound. Well, that's sobre. So, you can't, Ken, oh, please, you're not going to bore me with all these things. Well, it's good to know because there might be something that you would sing something not like this, not in the Baroque era and whatever, and we'll translate this into modern stuff. But I just want to point this out. If you really want to get good at this stuff, folks, learn this stuff because you can apply this stuff to modern music, and this is really cool. That's one of the things Dimanche is going to have on everybody once he starts really getting into the modern world, if someone can get him into singing things and translating a lot of the operatic stuff that he's learned into this. So now we talked about lyric tenors. In this case, it's lyric soprano. Now, it's an older voice. a much more legato, very, slow portamento, very slow kind of rich, warm, even toned sound. So let's play this here. So you can hear, oops, sorry. So you can hear, right? This really beautiful, sensitive sound. Now, do you remember me saying how the definitions of these has been retranslated? Well, it's interesting, and I'm glad it has, and let me explain why. So, a lyric tenor could also mean Steve Perry in this sense. He doesn't have an older, kind of laid back voice, so to speak, for the role that would be played if it was cast for an aria. That's true. But the qualities of the voice, Sam Cooke would be another example of this, where it's very lyric tenor. Paul McCartney, you think of, Penny Lane is in my ears and in my eyes. Even sound, everything's even. It's not this like the Sobre we just heard, high on the hill with the lonely goat, yodelay, right? It's not this real happy clappy stuff. It's very, like I said, very legato, very portamento. Now we're gonna get into spintos, and I'm gonna only do this for the soprano voices, because all of these characteristics that I'm describing to you apply exactly the same for the most part. They're just in different ranges, okay? So when we talk about an alto or contralto or countertenor or baritone or, dramatic and all these different things, I'm going to point out some things that are different about them. But so how could you see yourself? So probably some ladies out there said, yeah, I could see myself. I think I'm more of a lyric. I'm more smooth. I'm not so aggressive in the sound, though you can be. Okay, but that's how I see myself. So I want to talk about spintos, because they're actually they're kind of they get all the plum rolls, all the juicy great rolls, usually because the spinto soprano gets particularly in the Italian romantic operas too. By the way, like Verdi and Puccini, they get all of like the great dramatic roles. They get the sexy roles. They get the heartfelt, tear your heart out kind of roles. All of that, they get to traffic and all this stuff. So they're kind of the coveted ones. So partly for this reason, lyric and dramatic sopranos frequently take on these roles, whether they're naturally suited for it or not. Ooh, breaking some rules here. And more than a few lyric sopranos have shortened their careers by taking on heavy spinto roles. Now, this is important. What did I just say? I said more than a few lyric sopranos, the laid back, easygoing, Steve Perry losing his voice because he tried to sing hard rock, heavier sounding stuff, right? Or not being able, I shouldn't say losing his voice, excuse me, bad choice of words. Not being able to do that without hurting himself and hearing the difference. Let me say it that way. And of directly affecting him. So more than a few lyric sopranos have shortened their careers by taking on heavy spinto roles. So spinto is like the runner's body I've been talking to you guys that we're trying to build. We build a runner's body, so no matter what sport we put you into at Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy, you can excel as a spinto, as a lyric, as a dramatic, as a coloratura, whatever that is, you can step into these different roles, okay? Now, these roles call for a light, brilliant, high tone, so that really high coloratura stuff that you heard, right? But it also has the big climax of a dramatic, the big Herculean kind of sounding roles, or what are called the hero roles, as a hero or heroine as a woman. Okay, so spinto translates pushed. Now, what happens is in a pushed spinto sound, the hey, na, hey, na, hey, right? It's a constant pushed sound. Well, that can be dangerous because you're shocking the chord, you're pushing the chord, you're constantly, energetically pushing and forcing the body with this energy to push the fold and kind of, hit it really hard, really fast all the time. Now, this actually happens on 10 in the world of hyperglottal compression. So we're compressing glottal, meaning the glottis, the vocal folds. We're compressing air at the glottis, and we're pushing into it. And if we can't close the glottis and we don't understand how the relaxation response works, we stress out the glottis and they lose their voice over time. This is true for the pop world. This is true for all the rock singers in the 80s, or they lost their voices, or a lot of them female pop singers that lost a lot of range. This is the reason. Spinto, this is what's happened, okay? So if you notice too, when we talk about a Marvin Gaye, or we talk about, gosh, even a Frankie Valli, for example, and me, got younger kids may not know anything of what I'm talking about, but they still have their voices to this day because, Marvin Gaye's not alive, but the R&B guys that are still around, because they aren't pushing the sound, they're singing with a lyric voice, and it's a lot easier to maintain. However, they do lose range intonation, and they also lose their head voice. They lose their falsetto register considerably because they didn't strengthen that chest voice register. I cover all this in my singing course, folks. But anyway, so it translates pushed. But I've got a spinto here, and I want to play this for you so you can hear what I'm talking about. Here we go. Okay, now I'm pointing this out because I want you to visualize something. Again, Ken, this is so old. Why are you using opera? I'm glad you asked. Because it can really help you visualize the role that they're singing, okay? So in this case, you're looking at someone that kind of takes over the stage. She walks out and boom, I'm the lead role. And you know it. Boom, you just know. She's not a side role. She's not necessarily the villain unless the villain is the lead role. You can tell this voice takes over the stage. It's in the center of the register of all the female vocals. She can go up, she can come down, she can be dramatic, she can pull back as a lyric. She can do all these things. And so she's got all these components working for her, so you can pretty much cast her just about anywhere. So we all kind of want to aspire towards that, but you better know what you're doing or there's a really good chance you'll lose your voice. Now, I want to move on to dramatic because, and then I'm going to stop from the female roles and then I'm going to move on to some male roles for you guys out there. So guys, please hang in there because I promise if you just, even if you have to play this stuff back and go, well, how do I see myself? Am I dramatic? Am I spinto? When am I? How do I categorize myself? And then how do I do it, first of all? And then how can I branch off once I learned to be in my element? How can I step outside and be in other elements too? So I'm going to play dramatic. Now, dramatic, these are big soprano voices with sufficient heft or girth, so to speak, to be heard over the entire orchestra. Now, spintos are like that too, but they maintain an evenness, a big roundness across the full spectrum of their range. That's why they're the Herculean voices or the hero voices, because they're authoritative and big, and they don't do kind of what we just heard the spinto do, coming in and out of the dynamic range. That's not their role. Their role is, hey, right oh, I'm the man, I've come to save the day, here I come, right? That's the role of it. So if you find yourself feeling like you have to sing balls out everywhere you go, there's a good chance you're dramatic. All right? Anyway, let's play this here and we'll check this out. Okay, I'm going to stop this here. Now, this, by the way, is the room Brunhilde. You guys remember the name Brunhilde? I've heard that name before. Where did it come from? It came from a Wagner play. This isn't what you just heard. You heard the role of Brunhilde. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is, as I've gone down this, and the reason I put the coloraturas first and sort of in order, was that you can hear the Hertz frequencies of the range come down. You had coloraturas, you had the lyrics, and each one kind of dropped a little bit in the range. If you notice, dramatic is lower, bigger, and rounder, right? Now, there's a perception deception that it sounds higher because she's singing robustly and round and bold in the note. But let me make a point of this. When you hear Pavarotti singing Nessun Dorma and he hits the B on Vincito at the end, it sounds like that note is crazy high. Let me show you the note. Okay, it's a B. Vincito! Right, that's the note. Well, when you hear him do it, it sounds like he's in the stratosphere. But it's actually not even a high C for the male tenor. But it's the way the vowel is placed that makes it high. Now, this brings me to another point. Within each one of these vocal fachs are ranges, and we've only talked about sopranos. And I'm not going to get into all the different vocal types because we don't have time for this. I just wanted to cover one range classification, and then we're going to kind of stereotype them across the rest of them. And I do want to play some tenors here so that you can hear a couple tenor examples of this. The way the larynx is in the voice plays a tremendous role in this. Let me give you an example. In the case of a dramatic can also sing in the baritone register for the guys. Also, the sopranos can sometimes dip down, the tenors can sometimes dip down into the bari range. They have a low larynx. You hear my voice box? The Adam's apple. A lyric will be more in a neutral position. A coloratura can be all the. Their voice box can come up and down, and oftentimes resides in a raised position to a neutral position, and then they'll go back and forth when they do their octaves. You can actually watch the voice box like shifting back and forth. It's the craziest thing ever, right? But so they can actually change and morph this sensation. But dramatics usually have in a lower position. You've got lyrics in more of a neutral position, coloraturas going back and forth, so do spintos and so forth. Okay, so again, I'm gonna bring this home here in a minute, guys. So I'm gonna just blast through these now because I'm gonna talk about them. So still, within its own subcategory in the soprano range, we have something called mezzo-sopranos. They sing slightly lower than a soprano, okay? The vocal range of the operatic mezzo-soprano, often abbreviated to just the term mezzo, spans from a G to middle C and an A, sometimes an octave to 2 octaves above. Though plenty of roles require the stretch above this, mezzos are usually relegated to the villain roles for women. Okay, mezzos are usually the villain. So they're kind of middle C roles, and they kind of always play that role. And this is particularly in French operas too, by the way, like Habanera. In fact, let me just play you real quick because you'll get a kick out of this. This is a typical example of a mezzo, and you probably already all heard the Carmen's Habanera. So let me play this. Let me see if I can find it. I got to put my glasses back on. I want to show you this because let's see here. Check this out. You'll know the song, and then you can identify with the villain. Watch this. Okay, see how low the voice is? And she's, even though it doesn't sound like a villain song, it's playing the role of the villain. Habanera's the role of the villain. Carmen's, this is by Alina Granca. She can do more than this, but in this case, that's what the role that she's playing. So, all right, and then if I were to play a coloratura, that's the mezzo range, mezzo-soprano. If I were to play a coloratura, quickly, you're going to hear those runs, but done lower. Check it out. Okay, so you get the point. See, 1 minute this is done up an octave in a coloratura in the soprano range. In the mezzo range, it's done about an octave or somewhere around there, a fifth lower or something like that. So same thing is true for the lyric. I could play you the lyric. We don't have time for this. Maybe at some point when we can actually really dig into vocal fachs, and if you guys hit me really hard and say, Ken, please really show me all about the 25 vocal fachs, I will do a whole thing on each one of these and total takedowns and breakdowns of the laryngeal positions and all this stuff and how they're supposed to sing and how they get the roles cast and so forth. but most people don't care about opera. I'm just translating this so you can relate this to your modern singing and how this affects you. But I want to come in, and then, by the way, I want to talk about contraltos. This is another really important thing. Contraltos are really interesting, guys, because we talked about the different vocal fachs of ranges and what the length of the range is and how long that string goes. Okay, well, the contralto voice is the lowest of the female voices and by far the rarest. Okay, and it's rare because it can go from a really low F. I kid you not, some contraltos can dip all the way down to an F3 or even an F2. That is really low. And those sisters can get, by the way, or guys, in the case of the castrati, can get all the way up to a D6. Extremely high notes, folks. Very high notes. And that's a massive 5-octave range. I mean, you've got F2, F3, F4, F5, F6. That's 4 octaves, right? It's 4.5 octaves just in usable range. It's a lot of range. Anyway, so now prior to the 1800s, and by the way, most of the contralto roles were given to the castrati. Okay, so from the 1600s to like 1923, I think it was, all these roles were given to young guys because they had the maturation of being able to have the lower registration, but they also had the clipping, so to speak, where the testosterone didn't allow the voice to change and they could get up to the high registrations. So you have altos trying to reach those. Some of the spintos tried to do some of this stuff. Some of them hurt their voices doing it. But anyway, but it was viewed as unromantic and unsexy. Can you believe that? Now here's how music has changed. And good ladies, you're going to totally identify with this too. It's changed because in this world where a lot of understanding about the voice and where a lot of singers got their information and became singers, it's good to know where the foundation of all this came from, okay? For the tenor, for the most part, was the most important note he could sing in the night was the high C, right? Whether it's Caruso, Placido Domingo, Pavarotti, whoever it is, right? The high C was the note. It was the money note of the night. You do it a couple times in the night and you get your money and you go home, right? This was also true for the soprano, but the difference is big. Within the tenor register, the falsetto range was ignored. Now, head voice is I use a different terminology. We've talked about this many times. I don't want to relive that and repeat that. But in bel canto, head voice just meant anything that resonated in the head. So high C would be considered a head voice note because it's the highest note resonating in the head. I think of it as reinforced falsetto that matches the tonal qualities of your chest voice. Now, with that said, though, tenors were taught to sing in a belted register, a calling register, to get up to the high C and sustain that, and do that night after night. Women, it was exactly the opposite. In the soprano world, the women, their falsetto register, and because it was so undetectable, or you can notice very little transition between their call register through the segundo passaggio, second passageway, into their head voices, it just sounded like one note. You didn't hear much difference. Sometimes there's more air in the sound up top, but for the most part, it just sounded one long note. Whereas guys have that huge register break because the chords are thick and they're hard to manage, and then all of a sudden it gets into this high falsetto thing, and so we just write that off as not usable range unless we're singing in falsetto. We don't think of that as part of our chest belt and call register, whereas the women did. So the conductors and the composers would bring down the head voice all the way down into the chest register, therefore atrophying the power and the authority in the mid voice for a soprano. Not so much true for mezzos, but for the soprano, because all they were concerned about, just like the male tenor and the high C, they were worried about the female C6, the high C for the female soprano voice. So they sacrificed the belted chest register at the altar of that because that was sexy, that was beautiful, that was round, that told the story. In the case of the contraltos had a bad A belted mid-voice section. That's why the castrati was so good at it. That's why when you hear a Steve Perry or 80s rock guy with a high voice like myself, whatever, or some of the girls like Kelly Clarkson, or like I said, Sia, or we just talked about Mariah Carey, or whomever, right? Christina Aguilera. They are technically contraltos belting in the mid voice. Okay? Now, that was unsexy in the 1800s, but it's extremely sexy today. It's flipped. It's the exact opposite. So people don't care about, they like Mariah Carey's whistle register, that's fine. But they want to hear that Celine Dion belted mid-voice, Pat Benatar, whatever, your flavor, wherever your favorite singer is, belted mid-voice. That's where this comes from. So because it was unsexy, it was ignored and unexplored, and it went out the window, and they became extremely rare. So the castrati took over that role, and later some spintos and some dramatics tried to do it. A lot of them hurt their voices doing that. So now the Russians didn't see it that way. Kid you not. So the Russian says, we actually think it's kind of cool. So they ran with this, and isn't it interesting? And I say this not from a castrati standpoint, because I didn't say he was, but Dimash is from that descent. Think about it. So in that belted mid-voice section of that operatic style that was basically lost in the Spanish, French, and German world that wanted nothing to do with it, the Russians loved it. And so all of the Baltics and all of the Indo-European countries, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, which came to Czech Republic and Slovakia, and Russia, and all these countries, they embraced it and they ran with it. And to this day, they still practice this. And look what they're turning out. Dimash. Isn't that interesting? And this is what I've been talking about to you guys all this time. Before Dimash ever came out, I'm saying, guys, build the mid-voice, build your chest registered mid-voice, and you will own the world with your voice. And that is exactly what is happening. I have been vindicated. Anyway, so contraltos are divided into three categories. We got the coloraturas. So we got the contraltos that can do all the fancy stuff in the mid-voice, which we just talked about. By the range of that, by the way, the range of that is usually around an F sharp 4, G4, all the way up to around a G5, and usually their tessitura is around the tenor C, somewhere in there to the E, or B4 to E5, somewhere right in there. And if you guys don't know what that is, this is it. Sorry. Here, so this range here, A to. So anything in between there, that's actually the contralto range, okay? So they got the coloraturas, they do their fancy stuff, they got the lyrics like Steve Perry with their smooth vocals, Mickey Thomas, those kind of guys that are really smooth at the sound. They've got the dramatics, which is, they got the big Herculean, heroic kind of thing, so they can, you've seen Dimash pull it off. He pulls in, walks in, throws it down a dramatic, high C, bam, slams it, it's big, and then he just seamlessly goes right up into the soprano range. So you've got the countertenors. This is a really odd bedfellow because the countertenors go up really, really high. This is where I was telling you Wikipedia said they were pulling off, D7s. I don't think so. They can pull off some D6s. They can do an octave below that. They don't go up there. And again, that's way up in the flageolet whistle register, which is kind of silly to even say that those are notes because they're not. They're fa vocal folds, fold notes. So anyway, with that said, what else? I want to play a couple of these while we're at it because I want you to hear it. And hopefully this is interesting, you guys. I'm already an hour in, and I'm coming to a close. So hopefully this was interesting for you guys. Let's find out. Let's go here to countertenors. Let's go to the tenor. Okay, I'm going to go to a countertenor thing in Midsummer Night's Dream, and I'm going to do this here with Jock and Kowalski. So I want you to hear something about this. What did you notice about that? Was it a guy or was it a girl? Right, it was a guy, so you know, right? And the reason I bring it up is because Joaquin Kowalski was a castrati. Okay? Now, I'm sorry, of the castrati family. I shouldn't say he was a castrati. That was terrible. In fact, Alessandro, what was his name? It was what was his name? Alessandro... I thought I wrote his notes about him down. Anyway, I'll think of his name in a minute. It'll come to me. But Alessandro something was one of the last castrati's in 1923. But that's that countertenor range. Now we hear some tenors doing that, and that's why I think it's interesting that we talked about guys like Paul McCartney. But see how smooth he was singing that B, or B flat and B. And what did I just say that note was a minute ago? I said that note was the dramatic or the tenor note of Nessun Dorma Vincere. And he's going, oh, sing it so smooth, right? To where you don't know if it's a guy or a girl. That's why the castrati were so popular, okay? Because they could reside in both of those ranges. So that would be the countertenor. Let's move on to the tenor. So here we have one of my favorites. I kind of like, yeah, let me just play this for you guys and you'll see. Now, I could play this whole thing and it goes like, he's hitting that C like it's nothing. So where Pavarotti sounds like he's struggling to get the B in Nessun Dorma, even cracks at the end of his life, at the end of that, you've got, Juan Diego Flores, who's just killing it like it's nothing. UC Borling was actually good at that too. In fact, when UC Borling was asked, or when Pavarotti was asked who his favorite singer was, and then they said, what do you think of UC Borling? He said, for God's sakes, man, I'm only human, saying that UC Borling wasn't human, that he was extraterrestrial or superhuman. So we've got Juan Diego Flores doing that. So that's the tenor just sticking the high C like it's nothing. Here's the lyric, real quick. See how it's smooth? It's lower. See, it's lower, it's smoother, it's more gentle. It has sort of an older sound to it, right? Let's get to the spinto real quick. Here's the spinto, and because I want to get to a couple of berries before we wrap up for some questions here. So. Do you hear how it's pushed? It's pushed. It's pushed forward. The sound is forced out and pushed and kind of, it's almost like shouting at you, right? Then you have the dramatic. Here's the dramatic. And I want to get to held and tenors too in a second because that's important. Okay, now again, that's that big muscular John Vickers, big brown muscular sound. But let's get to the held and tenor. Held and tenor is sort of like the Hercules tenor, the hero tenor, okay? So here's the hero tenor. He's come to save the day, right? Can you hear this, guys? Can you put yourself in this thing? Now, Ken, how does this apply to me? Well, are you wanting to do a role that's come to save the day? Or are you kind of more of the laid back guy? Let's quickly get into some of the Barry ranges. So we've got the lyric Barry. All right, this is the baritone range. There are the older sounding voice there. Here's Verdi. And Verdi was actually written because of the name of Verdi, the composer. He actually wrote that people were writing parts for the sound of Verdi of the compositions. They liked it so much. Here's Verdi. Now that's the authoritative voice for Shakespeare. It's actually Macbeth was where that was taken from. Here's a dramatic. Now I hope you guys can follow this. It's lower and lower and lower. More somber. See, it's just drama. It's very dramatic, right? Now the bass baritones, real quick. Here's a bass. Now quickly, right? He's dropping the laryngeal position. He's going for lower tones. He's really long in the vowels. This is buffo or buffo, and these are usually the villainous roles, and also they could be the funny guys too. But these guys were actually interchangeable, so you could have a villain that played like a funny role. So a lot of times they were the funny voices of it that was happened to also be a villain. So.
Sveglio a mezzogiorno, suono appena il campanello e mi vedo a letto intorno. Suppliremo e trappano questo cerca protezione con la torta con ragione chi vorrebbe un impieguccio più da canta dagli ciuccio. See what I mean? It's funny, right? It's sort of like comedy villain, right? And last but not least is bass profundo. So here we go. All right, so I hope this was helpful. Again, this was a lot of stuff, but I wanted to get through all this to give you guys an understanding. So what is the difference between female voices and male voices? Like, Ken, you went to the moon. Did you have to give us all that information? Well, truth is that I don't see a lot of guys talking about this stuff. I don't see anybody replicating this stuff and showing it to you physically and walking you through step by step. So here's where we are with this. Now, to a very small extent, you have an understanding of the 25 basic vocal fachs and how they work. You should be able to kind of ask yourself the question, okay, the difference between girls and guys' voices is when they're younger, they're about the same. When the girls and guys get older, the guys' vocal folds get longer, they drop an octave, they have to work their way into getting back some of the range they lost when they were younger. Women's voices change very little, though I wanted to get into the category of different women's voices so that women could see themselves, well, Ken, I'm actually more in the coloratura thing, but I really want to belt like a spinto. Can you help me? Absolutely. So the sopranos that sing with a lighter lyric voice, or some of the coloraturas can belt too. Trust me, I didn't mean that they couldn't. But they don't relegate themselves all the way up to singing the high C and worrying so much about that and all the acrobatics that happens with the voice. So you ladies out there that want to get into the contralto range and the belting alto contralto range, you can. You just got to bring your voices down and drop them down. Remember, we've started this conversation by saying in today's culture, they want the women's voices to come down. They don't want them singing up in the rafters or talking up in the rafters. They want that sexy belted mid-voice section, and we do that at Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy. For you guys out there, again, we want to build, for you women too, we want to build a big round foundation in your chest register first and use that as the platform, the foundation for building the pillars of the house as we start adding room additions to that house, whether it's distortion, whether it's higher range, getting through the passaggio, whether it's mixed voice, I don't care what it is. All of these things apply, and they all are directly related to this old bel canto style of singing and using that as the platform by which we build all the rest of our voice. Now, again, we've talked about in bel canto in the Italian opera and German opera and stuff, there's only 5 vowel sounds, and they're pretty dark and covered or colored to be dark in the sound, and we need to contemporize those sounds to apply those to modern singing. But anyway, hopefully this was helpful, guys. I'm going to open this up to a couple of questions if I've got anybody left. Anyway, and I wasn't expecting a big crowd towards the end of this one. I was hoping that the people that really want to change their voices and really understand how this works, you can go through my free tutorials on YouTube. You can check out the stuff I've done. At least you know where some of this information comes from. It wasn't a cut and paste from some book somewhere. This is real life application stuff, folks. So let's see what we got. We got all kinds of questions that I'll answer non-related to this subject matter questions. But anyway, so non-related questions will be in a Q&A, which we'll have coming up. Gaston, whoa, we got, okay, hold on. Let's go. Go down. Gaston, or here, let me thumb through these and see. Gaston says, can you talk about the matching of the timbre of the chest and falsetto and why this applied to bel canto to find their natural vocal fach, if we are capable to change the timbre? Thank you, Gaston. Absolutely, yes. So when we transition from our belting chest register, our call register, we go through the yodel, and we understand how to keep the throat from spasming or regurgitating and closing down through that yodel, and can seamlessly connect our falsetto register. We have to first grow our falsetto register into a bright timbral sound to match the tonal qualities of our chest voice, to be able to get them to connect seamlessly and have it sound like the same voice, rather than it going into your falsetto and sounding hooty and fluty. I cover this in my singing course. I have a small tutorial on head voice on YouTube. Please check that out, because you can see how you get there, and then you can actually see the changes. Once you start to implement this and grow your voice, like any muscle in the body, once you start to grow it, you will see this transition working for you. So, and then by the way, thank you, Gaston, for the end of your question. It says to find their natural vocal fach, or really the tessitura of their usable range. So most people relegate themselves to saying, no, I'm only a baritone, like I was told, way back when, and I'm going to relegate myself to that. Well, no, actually what Gaston is saying is, Ken, does that then recategorize your voice once you built your chest voice into your head voice and have this long range? Then are you a contralto at that point when you started as a baritone? No, technically, you're still a baritone, in my case, I'm going to use myself, that can sing in the contralto register. So you've grown muscle structure that could be able to do it. So you won't redefine or recategorize what you are. What you'll do is you can step into that role of singing in that way. So, and so yes, you're able to change the timbre. What is your take on mixing early, say C4 and beyond? I've already talked about that. You can do it all you want. R&B guys do it all day long. Just remember that if you rely on that, you atrophy your chest voice, you lose your chest voice over time, you start to rely more and more on mixing and bridging early. When that happens, you get a really wimpy, belted mid voice, and then eventually when you get older, your falsetto goes away because there becomes a continental drift, a tearing, so to speak, a ripping, tearing between your chest and head voice, and then you just start to lose your voice altogether, your chest voice and your head voice over time. Diplomatic person. Ken, I'm male. I am wondering what my voice type is. My lowest note is C2, and I can hit tenor chest to high C, and my mix F sharp 5. You're mixing at F sharp 5. I'm gonna bet you're probably mixing around the C, and then it says you can get all the way to the C6. Tell you what, can you please send us in our forums a sample of that? I'd like to hear that, because that's very unusual, and you might not be using the same terminology I'm using, and I might be thinking you're in mix and you think you're in chest. Jay, the street preacher, tried to keep small voice. Zeno, what's your opinion? Tried to keep small voice. We got to talk about that at another time, because that's a really good question. But the only way to answer that is we have to have a good understanding of how the vowel modifications work in order to maintain that small voice. And I cover that in my singing course, and I do have a video tutorial on vowel modifications. I'll put that in the description when we're done with this. Zena, what's your opinion of hybrid vocal fachs like Dugazon? Okay, so good question. And when you say hybrid vocal fachs and you use someone like Lana Del Rey, I don't use singers like that as examples, because I don't think that they really sing from a technical standpoint that great. So while people love that, this Cecilia Bartoli and Lana Del Rey, or Cecilia, whatever, they use almost mix in their entire range themselves. So I don't think of that as hybrid vocal fachs. I just think of someone constantly singing in mix. And they never, there's no belting register to that, and there's no strength in the mid voice, in my opinion. And I wouldn't, you can warm up to that sound, but please try to get to a brighter tone so that you can actually grow your voice, because that sound will not grow your voice. Hussein Al-Shahara, how do you stretch chest range safely and lower your larynx? I have a singing course. It's called How to Sing Better Than Anyone Else. You can find it at KenTamplinVocalAcademy.com, or if you want to start slower, go on to how do you belt, or belting tips and whatnot. I have a lot of really great tutorials on that on YouTube, and I'll put that in the description so you can check it out. Simply the best. When does the voice actually stop growing for boys and girls? You know what? Simply best, that is an awesome question. And I'm gonna wind this down because we're already like way over. But I'm gonna answer this one question, and please, we'll save the other questions for our Q&A. But I'm gonna close with this question. It never stops growing, or should I say, it never stops changing. As I've gotten older, I'll be 57 this year. As I've gotten older, I'm in really good shape. But as I've gotten vocally, I'm in really good shape. But I still have had to morph and revisit things that I've read about Caruso when he got older, Pavarotti when he got older, and different things like that, because the voice changes, and there isn't quite the elasticity and resiliency as we had when we were younger. Muscles get stiffer, and we have to take longer to stretch, longer to warm up, but with that comes, like a fine wine, the aging process of tone. I like my tone today way better than I liked my tone in my 20s. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. That isn't just a ploy to say, oh, I'm awesome. No, really, I really sincerely like how quickly I can get to my tone, knowing my voice better, and all the things that go in it. I like my vocal tone, my vibrato, my range, my pitch, the roundness of sounds, different ways I can do different effects to change the sound of my voice. Way better now than in my 20s. My 20s, though, I was able to, my stamina came a lot easier than it comes to me today. I have to work harder and longer at it. So the voice never actually stopped changing. Now, if you're asking about the growth stages of the voice, that's different. So you have a growth stage at age 3 to age 5, and age 5 to age 7. And by the way, guys and girls are different. 7 to 11 or 12 or 13. 13 to 17 or 18, 18 to 24, 24 to 33, 33 to 40, 40 to 50. Those are actual mile markers of how the voice actually physiologically changes. Yes, that's true. And there are ways to do workouts through those physiological changes to maintain everything you had before and expand and compound those into a beautiful voice. So there are very definite specific mile markers for change. I just said those quickly as I went by. Guys and girls vocals are different. Of course, we understand there's from puberty to maturity in your teens, from teens on into a greater growth spurt, which is in your 20s, mid-20s. If you notice around age 30, you start going, whoa, there's another big change that happens if I don't do something to take care of my voice in my 30s. I start to lose it. In the 40s, we start to lose a lot of elasticity. So you hear people going to, those weird vibratos and all that stuff that happens as you start to age past 40. We have to take care of all that stuff. And maybe at some point I'll do a whole thing on that. Okay, that was my last question, guys. I love you. God bless you guys. Hopefully this was helpful. It was an hour and 20 minutes long. So hopefully you stayed the distance. And until next time, I will be back next Thursday at 9 a.m. And we will continue to rock this thing. So God bless you, gang. Thank you to my notification squad. And until next time, peace out.